You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricini, and Alex Hobson.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sticks in the Six, episode 164. Boys, we're brought to you by the Hockey Podcast Network, DraftKings, and Manscaped. And speaking of Manscaped, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that Smooth Sack Summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN. Summertime and the trimming is easy. As always, nervous about those little nicks downstairs? The Manscaped Performance Package 5.0 Ultra has everything you need to prepare that summer bod. Every man knows how scary it can get when going for a close shave below the belt. That's why I trust Manscaped for my sensitive areas. Inside this package, you'll find the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Their 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. We also have dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones, 3 length setting combs, and did I mention this trimmer is waterproof too? Beach, lake, or shower, this razor will devour even the strongest pubes. Now that you have the perfect haircut, use Manscaped liquid formulations to keep that freshness even at the hottest summer barbecues. The Crop Soother Aftershave Lotion and Crop Preserver Anti-Chafe Ball Deodorant. Once they touch your sack, you'll never go back. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts to their Performance Package 5.0, the Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. More wet products? Say no more. Manscaped's new Buff Bundle is all you need to keep the summer heat a breeze. This bundle includes their signature silicone scrubber and body wash. Ditch your nasty loofah and grab a taste of freshness. Get 20% off plus free shipping with code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. And the fun part with Manscaped, or I guess the Smooth Sack Summer, is that the rumors start flowing as well. We're right in the heat of the rumor mill. We've seen a lot of moves. Peter, we discussed it last week, kind of taking over the Stanley Cup final. First shout out to the Florida Panthers on their first ever Stanley Cup win. Mm-hmm. Big win. Tight game, that final game 7. McDusty and Draisaitl didn't really show for those last couple games, which didn't get it done for Edmonton, but they sure as hell put up a solid fight over the final series. But McDavid did win the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP on the losing team. First one to do it since J.S. Shiger with the Anaheim Ducks. As we've seen this week, guys, lots of jersey reveals with the Fanatics taking over as well. So kind of a reminder with that Anaheim Ducks jersey coming out, the orange Mighty Ducks logo coming back. But we got more important stuff to talk about. We're going to try and keep this episode tight as Peter's got to get going. He's headed down to the draft in Vegas for the hockey writers this weekend. So very exciting for him. He'll be at the Sphere taking it all in. So let's get right into the Leafs conversation here. Big news out of Russia. First, obviously, Matvei Michkov coming over for the Philadelphia Flyers. But for the Leafs, Artur Akhtiamov is expected to come over and continue his development and career north of the border. Peter, this is a guy we've been talking about for quite some time. What are your thoughts on Akhtiamov coming over?
Yeah, big shout out to Hockey News Hub, because that account deals with a lot of the KHL, Russian prospects, everything like that. And, Terry Koshin reached out to Dan Milsey, and it is confirmed that he is coming over to continue his career in North America. And, it's great to see that, the hometown or homegrown products, prospect-wise for the Maple Leafs in the goaltending position, are starting to make their mark right now. We saw the big strides that Dennis Hildeby took last season coming over, looking very sharp at points. Again, some growing pains there, but you know what? For the most part, he was solid for the Marlies in net. The team itself just wasn't that quite competitive. But you look at the numbers that Yamov had as well throughout his career in Russia and the KHL and VHL, and you look at the records that he had. I mean, his save percentage, whether he had a winning record or losing record, didn't dip below 920, and his goals against average was pretty decent as well. And let's face it, the VHL, KHL, they're tough leagues. There's no doubt about that. And for like a young goaltender to come in, get those minutes, get those starting nods, and basically be the backstop for his team, it shows great promise and potential that he has. So the fact that he's coming over right now, and you have a potential tandem in the AHL of Hildeby and Aktayamov, that's going to be really fun to see, and very, a good sign for the Maple Leafs that their goaltending prospects are starting to flourish and, see some success right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been high on this guy for quite some time since we've seen what he's been able to do across the pond there. But Alex, what are your thoughts on the Leafs finally getting maybe their most solid goaltending prospect in recent memory?
Yeah, it's just it's a good thing to see them have some legitimate goalie prospects that we can consider as potential future pieces of the team. Before this, it was always Joseph Woll and Ian Scott, and obviously it's a good thing that Joseph Woll has kind of come around as a guy for them, and I know he's someone that is reportedly signing an extension with the Leafs as well. Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's just cool to see all the goalie prospects that they have, and know that they've got some legitimate development options down the road between him, Hildeby, and Peksa. I think it's a good thing to have them all closer to the system. I think that this means they probably cut ties with guys like Keith Petruzzelli and have Hildeby, Peksa, and Aktayamov all in the AHL. And I know they've in the past tried to use their ECHL as well. I'm not really sure what the plan is going to be for that going forward, because the Leafs don't currently have any CHL team, if I recall correctly. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, but it's just good to have options. I think with goaltending, you got to have as many goaltending options as possible. And, you kind of just got to hope that one of them hits. And I know that Aktayamov has some pretty favorable advanced stats that compare him to guys like Linus Ullmark before he made it in the NHL. So we'll see what comes of them. But again, it's like there's never a bad thing to have more options than not, because if one of them hits, then that's all you need.
We're going to talk a little bit more draft in a little bit here, but one of the big questions I saw raised over the last week, and this kind of ties into our next subject in McGroarty, is there's a lot more of a conversation to be had about selecting a Russian in the draft versus selecting a U.S. player that's going through the NCAA now. Obviously, we've seen players like Adam Fox, we've seen McGroarty, we've seen Cutter Gauthier. All these guys kind of make the call, use the little bit of power that they have to avoid playing for the teams that drafted them. I got to get your take on this, and I'll throw it to you first, Alex. But is it more risky taking a U.S. player, going through the NCAA channel than it is taking a Russian nowadays?
I think that's a really tough question, and I think it's one that's only, I don't know. To be completely honest, I think it's really a question that can only be asked for individual players, because I don't think the McGroarty situation's like the Gauthier story whatsoever. I don't know why. As far as I'm concerned, Gauthier just flat out didn't want to play for Philadelphia, and that's why he orchestrated the trade. From what I read about the McGroarty situation, he wants to play in the NHL next year, and he feels like he can, but the Jets don't want him to. And the Jets want to get him signed, but they want to put him in the AHL. And I think that's why he originally committed to the University of Michigan for another year, because he's like, if you're not going to put me in the NHL, then I want to try and lead my team to a championship again. But No, I would if we're gonna look at those two versus the history of Russians and the question marks surrounding them after you draft them, I would say no. I don't think that there's much of a difference. Sorry, I wouldn't say that the North American players are kind of creeping into that conversation, because I think that the Gauthier situation kind of stands on its own. I think McGroarty, I don't think he's really demanding his way out of Winnipeg yet. I think Winnipeg is just kind of trying to cash in on while the value's high. And they've obviously got some solid forward prospects there. They got Colby Barlow, they got Cole Perfetti, they got guys like, it's not like they're supremely hurting for forward prospects. So I wouldn't say that situation is like the Gauthier one. But yeah, I'm gonna hold my dialogue on McGroarty because I really want the guy, and we're gonna talk about it in a little bit. So that's where I would stand on that.
And Peter, same question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did read that the Gauthier situation was similar in a sense that you know, he'd finished his college year and he wanted to come up and play his 9 games and at the tail end of the season, and obviously Philadelphia didn't have room for him, or / didn't want to bring him up, and that's kind of why, you know, the season prior he had made the not I guess the same type of request that like an Eric Lindros would have made and saying, don't draft me, I won't play for you, but there was some interest there at one point to play for Philadelphia, and because of the decisions made by the organization, he obviously decided that he no longer wanted to play for them. So I guess it is similar in that sense that he was betting on himself that he was NHL ready, and that's kind of what it, you know, boiled down to. But Peter, what are your thoughts on that same type of idea, Russian versus US NCAA?
Yeah, it's starting to become more, we're seeing more issues with US NCAA prospects than we are with Russians, because it's like literally 1 or 2 seasons where the player that's drafted from Russia wants to stay there for another year or two. It's not a big deal. We saw that with Michkov. It was bound to be 2 to 3 years, but whoever was getting them, they could probably wait it out. Now we're hearing the news about Ivan Demidov, who wants to make the jump within a year, which is a good sign for NHL teams. But at the same time, it's also his height and weight coming into it, you know, saying that he's 6 feet now, then he's all of a sudden now the second best prospect, when a lot of us have been saying that Ivan Demidov is literally the second best forward prospect behind Macklin Celebrini right now for like months and months on end, and now everyone's having Demidov second, but I kind of digress right there. Yeah, for me with the McGroarty situation, it kind of feels like the Gauthier one, but it doesn't, because this kind of feels like more of a development thing. Like both maybe his family, or Elliot Freeman said that both his agent and family are in talks. Like they're all in agreement on this, that this possibly may be the best course of action for him. And even so, like the depth chart that Winnipeg has, like they got good names, but it seems like other names that kind of fell off. You know, we all thought that Vinny Heinola was going to be a standout, strong two-way puck moving defenseman. You really haven't seen much of him make that jump. You know, they got a deep prospect system, but to let someone like a name like Rucker McGroarty leave, given his power forward like game, the ability to find the back of the net, the compete level, he's a bona fide leader, like on and off the ice. This guy, he wants to do everything to win, and he would be a great locker room presence. And not necessarily trying to draw a comparison to Cole Perfetti, but he's kind of like in that middle part of the lineup right now where he's trying to move up. I know he's dealt with some injuries, but it kind of seems like the development system for the Winnipeg Jets could be an issue for McGroarty. I'm not saying that that's 100%. It's just something that I can think of at the top of my head. But I mean, yeah, it's starting to become a bit of a pattern right now. Fox, Gauthier, not necessarily. I kind of got that, or like there were some sect in the Maple Leafs fandom that said, oh, watch Matthew Knies not re-sign in Toronto, go back, they had to trade him and everything like that. That didn't happen. But it seems like this is becoming more of a theme with NCAA prospects than Russians, where, you know, a year or two, they want to stay there playing the KHL for a bit and then make the transition over. Totally fine. Like it's the same thing as staying in the AHL for another year or two to season your development and then making the jump right away. But it does seem like a little bit of a talking point that's sort of being swept under the rug right now than anything else. And it's kind of something that should be brought into the light a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's kind of the question that's going around the hockey world right now, obviously with the McGroarty news coming out. But I want to get your takes on it because, Peter, I think he'd be a good fit in Toronto. I think it'd be an interesting pickup for Brad Treliving to bring in a guy like Rutger McGroarty. That said, I'm wondering what you'd have to give up for him, and do you see him kind of fitting into that mold with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
It's funny you brought that up because, yeah, I definitely think he would be a fit. And shout out to Alex for going through one of my old articles and posting the screen caps of Rutger McGroarty saying that he grew up a Maple Leaf fan, saying that he has that compete level. Rutger McGroarty is literally a Brad Treliving type player. He plays with that intensity, that in your face mindset, that power forward game. Like he literally dominated the collegiate level. Was a main factor for Team USA at the World Juniors, and now you're starting to see what he can do. Everyone is saying that you're going to have to give up, a lot for Rutger McGroarty, but let's face it, the player says, I don't want to play here. I'm not going to move. That kind of diminishes the return value for the team because the team's handcuffed. They're not going to ask for 2 firsts and a top prospect for Rutger McGroarty right now. That's going to be because he wants to be moved. They're going to be like, okay, well, we're not doing this unless we get this. And Rutgers are going to be like, okay, well, then I'm not going to play regardless. Do something. We saw that the value for Adam Fox it was pretty decent, but it was, average. Same with Cutter Gauthier. I believe they got the first, but it was also Jamie Drysdale who needed to change the scenery. I just found something from Jason Bacala on Sportsnet right now about the trade value for Rutger McGroarty. And he says that a 3rd round pick, specifically in 2025, a middle 6 forward prospect or mid-range defense prospect is basically what he would ask for McGroarty at this point. And because of the fact that, even if you were to give up a first, I think the Maple Leafs should give up their first this season, along with, I don't know, maybe 2 prospects like Nick Abruzzese and or Roni Hirvonen to the Winnipeg Jets in order to bring in McGroarty, because one, you would gain more contract space by taking or moving on from another prospect as well. But they don't have a 3rd in next year. So I think that first rounder this year, if it is in play for Rutger McGroarty, I think I would take that over any other prospect. I mean, we'll get to some names to talk about, but I would definitely take Rutger McGroarty's upside and what he's showing right now with that first pick and move it on, then select it this time around. But yeah, it seems like the possibility is right there for the Maple Leafs. Even if they don't have a mid-round pick, that first would be more valuable to the Jets than anything at this point.
Alex, your thoughts on bringing in McGroarty if you're the Leafs and Brad Treliving?
Yeah, Peter's article was the first place that I went when I saw that news break because it fired me up at the time, and it got me a little unhealthily obsessed with the possibility of the Leafs drafting him, and then I was all disappointed when he went 14th overall to the Jets. I think it was 14th anyway, but yeah. I've been a big fan of his ever since his draft year, and Peter is right on when he says that in the situation that McGroarty's in, where he's sounding like he's not going to want to play for the Jets and they're already shopping him, that doesn't do any favors for his trade value. And, it just makes me think that the Leafs have a unique opportunity here to pounce on a guy like him. And, I would say that I think that if you're going to talk about a trade offer for him, definitely you would have to move the 23rd pick. And I'd even go as far as to send Liljegren's rights back the other way at this point, because if you look at the Winnipeg Jets prospect system, they are extremely thin on D right now. Extremely thin. Up front, they've got a wealth of prospects. They've got Colby Barlow, they've got Brad Lambert, they've got the only Chaz Lucius, the only other prospect that they really have on D right now is Ville Heinola, and there's been trade rumors regarding him for years now. He's kind of in a similar position that Liljegren's in with Toronto right now. And honestly, I love Timothy Liljegren, and I would prefer that he figures it out in Toronto versus the Leafs trade him and he ends up succeeding somewhere else. But the way I see it, if it's for someone like McGroarty, someone who could develop the way that he's expected to, I think your best case scenario, if you're using that 23rd pick, would be drafting a player that's even in the same stratosphere as McGroarty. And so I think it's a unique opportunity here to add somebody who I absolutely think could play in the NHL next year. I think he could slide right into the middle six and, have a bit of a Nyes-like season. And like you said, he's a rarity. He's from Nebraska. He's a Leafs fan somehow. He's a guy that explicitly says he turns into a leader and he plays better when the bright lights are on him. It's like this guy's reading a handbook on what the Leafs need. So, I think that they should do whatever they can to try and get him. And if that's a first round pick and a guy like Liljegren or a Nick Robertson, even, I want them to try and make a deal for him. So I'd be interested to see what kind of deal that looks like. But if it's around that price, I think he's well worth it.
Guys, call me a cynic, and maybe it's just my distrust for people on a regular basis. But I have a hard time when somebody has requested a trade without knowing the reason why, or requesting out of somewhere. I have a hard time wanting to have them brought in and trusting that they're going to have the interests of the organization, at the forefront. And I think that's what's kind of holding me back a little bit. I think he'd be a fantastic fit, playing on a line with, let's say Austin Matthews. I think it'd be fantastic to see him come in there. I think he'd add a big body. He'd, another guy that can, help out offensively. But I have a tough time, trusting a player that has already without having proven themselves. And this is my issue with the new NHL is every deal that's made is a, this we're paying you for what you could potentially do. We're trading for you because of what you could potentially do, without seeing like, hey, what can you actually do at the NHL level? Because not everybody's game transitions to the NHL level the way that we expect it to. He might have been a 14th overall pick, but there's no guarantee that he's going to work out. And that's nothing against McGroarty at all. Like I think, honestly, in all honesty, I do believe that he'll transition well to the NHL. I think he's going to have a great career. Maybe as a torn Leaf fan who's watched this team struggle and basically shit the bed for years, I want to see somebody that's going to put the organization first. And that was the big thing with Craig Conroy when he went into Calgary, is that he wanted people there that wanted to be there. And you guys mentioned, he's a fan. Maybe he would put the organization first. Who knows? But I got to see it first, and that's what makes me want to hold off on trading, the first round pick. And I know that's something that I don't know. Maybe I'm just caught up in playing armchair GM, and I don't want to give away that first round pick for another year. And but I struggled to make that move, knowing that he's already kind of utilizing the power as a guy who's never played an NHL game. I struggle with that.
That's fair.
There's nothing wrong with having that take. Sometimes you need a little bit of pushback. Can't have the three of us agreeing on something every single time, even though you guys have great takes and oftentimes we're aligned. And you know what? I think it just comes down to maybe I'm just a little more willing to make that risk than you are, and that's fair, because you very well could be someone that is running on reputation and running on their draft or their college resume, and maybe that doesn't translate to the NHL. That is sometimes the case, so it is a reasonable concern to have. I'm just such a fan of the player, and I think that he's young enough, and if the reason is truly that he wants to play in the NHL and doesn't want the Jets to put him through their conservative development process, I think that's a little more forgivable of a reason to want out than you're not paying me enough money, or I don't like the city, or any of those reasons before. Like, at least it comes from having a drive to play in the NHL and succeed at the highest level, because that is in a sense what the Leafs want.
And one other thing too, I think you got to look at like what kind of players succeed in the playoffs. Like it's those big, you don't want to bring size into the equation, but it's those guys that have this 6'1", 6'2" frame. It's the guys that have that ability to battle and not back away from a play. He's typically that kind of player that you would want in a playoff situation. I know he's going to be a rookie next year, and you don't want to thrust him into that role. But 2-3 years down the line, he's going to be that impact type of player where he's going to get into the gritty areas. And it's, players like him that are a reason why you see Colorado win the championship, Vegas, Florida, all of these teams right now. They got players that are willing to do everything. And the Maple Leafs, they have some players, but they don't have a whole lot of them that can do that. And there's still some uncertainty with some of the prospects right now that if they're really going to make that jump and if they're going to be bottom six players, you need a little bit more impact in the top six. And they have some other depth pieces that can surpass some of those other prospects that may be better off elsewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, like I look forward to this season because I think it's going to be one of the best Calder races we've seen in a long time. Obviously, Cutter Gauthier, he could be great for Anaheim. If McGroarty does crack an NHL lineup, I mean that's something to look at as well. I think there's a lot to look forward to this season. Matvei Michkov coming over if he cracks Philly's lineup, and then obviously Macklin Celebrini. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to this season, boys, and it could be one of the best Calder races we've seen in a long time. But before we do get into the draft, I think it's a safe spot to jump off here and quick word from our sponsors over at DraftKings. Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. Obviously, you can bet some props on the upcoming NHL Draft. Is Macklin Celebrini going to officially be the #1 pick? Make sure you check that out on DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights reserved. Well, Peter, we mentioned it off the top of the show. You're headed to the draft in Vegas. Maybe not one of the deeper drafts we've seen in recent memory. Very defensive driven first round, second round, as you can see from your final rankings. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to watch how teams approach this draft, whether it's going to be a best player available or whether it's going to be the needs of the team. Let's get your take first. What are we going to see from this draft in terms of, maybe defensive players going higher than expected, or are we going to go, best player available?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a premium on defense. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you look at the top ones at the top of the list. It's most likely Artem Shudov is going to be the second overall pick, but you got Sam Dickinson, you got Zeev Buium, you got Zane Parekh, Carter Yakimchuk, Adam Yurchek, who hasn't played a full year, but the potential still resonates with him as a mobile two-way defender. Anton Saleyev, and you even got Stein Solberg, who increases stock from the World Hockey Championships right now. So yeah, defense is definitely going to be at a premium. EJ Emery is another top name that tested very, very well. And when we were at the Combine, we saw his results and we were absolutely blown away at how much strength he has in terms of the jumps, the bench presses, everything like that. You can rest assured that they are going to be highly sought after names. And up front, it's a decent crop. I mean, you have a few, basically the one elite skater is Macklin Celebrini. You got other top 6 players that have, superstar potential. But then after that, it may seem like it may be a drop off, but there are a lot of potential good fits in terms of being second, third line players that can really make an impact and drive the play for a team. I think that, there's going to be a main focus on defense, especially in the first few rounds, but do not count out the forwards because there's a lot of great potential and great picks that can happen within the top 64 picks.
Alex, what are your thoughts? Is this a best player available, or if you're a team like the Winnipeg Jets making your pick, are you looking at maybe, hey, we don't have a lot of defensive prospects, we're going to go with a defenseman regardless of if there's a star forward out there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's really going to come down to kind of last year's situation where if they have the ability to trade it for an upgrade, then they'll use it. However, I think if they don't get that kind of an upgrade or that kind of an opportunity to deal the pick, I think they're just going to go best player available at the draft like they did with Cowan last year. So it's really up in the air, and it all depends on what kind of happens leading up to that draft in general. If they do keep the pick, I would like them to, I think, they'll probably go best player available, but I do like the idea of like an EJ Emery type, like Peter said. I'm honestly, as long as they use the pick and identify a clear need with it, whether that's through a trade or a draft, I'm fine. I just don't want them to be kind of making it just for the purpose of making a pick.
So is it possible then that we see an Easton Cowan type pick from the Maple Leafs?
I'll let you go, Peter. You're going to be there.
I was about to say, it would not surprise me because kind of the same situation last year where they didn't pick until the 5th round. They don't pick until the 5th round again this year. I mean, there's a 4th round. There's a long gap between rounds 2 and 3. And if there's someone that they see in round 2 or 3 that they have the upside, I don't know exactly if they will do it, but I think it does seem possible given on what happened last year. They can hit a home run. Obviously, it's a bit of a gamble, but there's the fact that they can get a decent prospect. But when you look at where they're at right now, there's a lot of great talent that could still provide a lot of great upside for this team. I mean, I was just looking at Bob McKenzie's rankings, and similar to mine, the talent that's available between 20 and 28, basically, I have the same players as Bob McKenzie. You look at, Sasha Bovaert, Igor Chernyshев, Stein Solberg, Ryder Ritchie, Dominic Bedenka, Tariq Parasek, Andrew Basha. These are all players that bring an element to this team that they desperately need. I'm a little bit higher on EJ Emery, but he's inside my top 20. But if he's there at 23, I don't think the Maple Leafs should second guess him because I took them in our THW Prospect Corner mock draft because he's exactly the right fit. But all those players that I mentioned that are in that same range, they have that element, whether it's, the tenacity and, ability to find the open space like Andrew Basha, or even someone like Sam O'Reilly who could jump into the first round, whether it's this change of pace of play that Ryder Ritchie brings, the awareness that Tariq Parasek has to make himself open and become available, and the physicality that both Emery and Solberg bring, the two-way play of Chernyshев, they all have something that the Maple Leafs value, and it's something that they could take with that pick. And if they do go off the board, but make it count as a result, it will definitely be something to watch out for because it can happen again. But given the names available, I think it's more likely that they could probably keep that pick.
Alex, what do you think? You think it's a pick that they look to keep and maybe make that surprise first-round pick like they did with Easton Cowan?
I think they're probably more likely to keep the pick for sure. I don't know if I think it'll be one of those situations where if a team approaches them with an offer, they might do it, but I don't think they're going to actively look to trade it. I know they did offer it for Jacob Markstrom, and obviously that trade didn't go through. So I'm not saying that I don't think they're going to shop with it at all. But yeah, it's gonna be hard to say,
especially if they get a pick in the 2nd round too. That way, if they move a little bit further down in the 1st and they get that 2nd, that could possibly happen as well because that 2nd round pick could be great value.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll be honestly, it'll be Brad Treliving's first round with the Leafs. Obviously, he wasn't there last year due to the let's call it the Calgary tax that they seem to be putting on the Leafs now that Treliving's there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Leafs do. I like I said, I wouldn't mind if they kept it. I think there is some talent at the second half of that first round. That said, as you mentioned, Peter, if they're able to trade down and get a pick in the second round and maybe an extra piece for the team now, that'd be something that obviously you'd have to consider given the situation as well. We got to talk a little bit of free agency because I know you guys we've talked in the chat a little bit about. This is going to be a wild 4 days for the NHL, and already we're seeing a bunch of trades. I don't like the San Jose Sharks are all over the place right now. The Detroit Red Wings seem to be making room for a big move as well.
Mm-hmm.
So free agency will be happening shortly after the draft, given a couple days. Is there one target that you think the Leafs have to go after? Alex, I'll throw it to you first.
Oh boy. Well, it's got to be one of the defensemen that's available, but just for the purpose of being different, and I know that neither of you guys are going to bring up this player, I'm going to put my cards into the mold of Jeff Skinner. He's one of my favorite players. He's one of my favorite non-Leafs in the NHL, and I fully acknowledge, I've tweeted about him like 5 times today already. I fully acknowledge that he is not exactly the type of player they should be pursuing, and that he's not great defensively and doesn't play physically all that much. He's also a former Kitchener Ranger. I grew up watching him. He complimented my temporary neck tattoo one time at a fan fest, and just a salt-of-the-earth guy who loves to score goals, and I think he deserves to try and make a playoff run. So I'd like them to try and sign him.
What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, considering that they bought him out, obviously his contract's going to be a little bit less now than the $9 million that he was making. I mean, because you look at after that 40-goal season in 18-19, he had 21 in 2 seasons. That was probably like the lowest point of his career, but then he bounced back with another, 68 and 2, plus another 24 last season. I mean, that's kind of the production that you wanted to see, but it's still not at $9 million caliber kind of thing. So the Maple Leafs do find some room for Jeff Skinner. I mean, he's an extra left wing that you could use. And if one or both of Domi and, Bertuzzi are gone and you give some of that money to Jeff Skinner, and even if you go after Jake DeBrusk, if you bring in both players on that left side in the top 6, I think that's something that, definitely could warrant that. I think if you are going forward, I've been on the Jake DeBrusk wagon for some time. I think they've had talks or potential interest in him. So if there's something that you want to look at and a player that can rise up into the playoffs like he did the last 2, he's definitely a name to keep an eye on. And if we're going defense, I still like the possibility of Matt Roy. I know, Forrest, I'm going to give a big shout out to you because, he was a name that you had as a trade target, and one name that I came up with, or I, piggybacked off you because he was going to be a UFA. It was the perfect opportunity, but $6 million AAV as a potential asking price, I'd be a little bit wary, but he's everything that they need on that back end. Another shutdown, 2-way kind of defender. Production increased a little bit this season. I think that if you have another type of player like that, great, but I think it just may be a little bit too rich for me. And yeah, I think most likely defense is going to be a priority for them. They're going to be on all the big names right now.
I'd love to sit here and without a big smile on my face say Jake Gensel, because I think that would be amazing if they went out and signed Jake Gensel.
Yeah.
That being said, I think we all know the Leafs cap situation, and Jake Gensel obviously wouldn't fit into that.
If one player gets moved, maybe.
Yeah, if one player gets moved, possibly, but I'm not going to sit here and hold my breath. Obviously, Christopher Tanev is a guy that I think they need to go after, a right-handed defenseman, somebody I think they targeted, heading into the trade deadline. But another guy that obviously I think is somebody they should look at is Alec Martinez. This guy has veteran leadership. He's a guy that he's been to the show. He understands what it takes to win a cup. He's won 2. He's a guy that's willing to lay the body on the line and play at both ends of the ice. Maybe not as offensively sound as he once was, but he's definitely a guy that can add some flavor on the back end. And with TJ Brody now heading into free agency as well, I think he kind of replaces that stability that TJ Brody has given us over the last number of years. So Alec Martinez is a guy that I think they should take a look at as well. Obviously, Matt Roy is a guy that I discussed later last season. And Jeff Skinner, I think, would be a fun option. I think he'd be a fun option to kind of throw in there and see what he can bring to the mix as well. But, it's going to, like we said, it's going to be a fun time over the next 4 days. Obviously, Peter, you're heading down to Vegas, so you're going to have a ton of fun down there.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully everything that happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. You can tell us a little bit about that.
Off the record.
Yeah, off the record. Before we close out here, guys, just a couple of extra notes here. I don't know if you guys saw that the CHL and the U.S. program now will have a top prospects game, which will change the top prospect game that we're so used to seeing. But it gives us a little bit more opportunity to see what's south of the border as well as what we're seeing in the CHL as well. So that'll be interesting to watch as that unfolds as well. Bad news for Coyotes fans as Marullo is walking away as the owner of the Arizona Coyotes. Basically, just everything that's happened over the last number of years is just
it was for nothing.
All for nothing.
Yeah.
All for nothing. It's it truly is. I have to say, from a standpoint, being on the outside looking in, I think it's a complete embarrassment. The way he handled everything, and it's truly unfortunate for the Arizona Coyotes. The one thing I will say as a Leaf fan, no more worry about Matthews and Nyes leaving to head home to Arizona, because that's just simply not an option anymore. So, anyways, boys, before we close out, anything you wanted to add, Peter? What are you looking forward to heading down to the draft?
I'm going to tell you what I'm not looking forward to, and that's the 40-degree heat down there. That's like close to 100 Fahrenheit. So I'm already hearing, not necessarily bad stories, but it's like, man, the heat is definitely going to be a big factor and something I'm not used to. But you know what? It's America's playground for a reason, right? There's going to be a lot of fun going on, especially with the draft happening. I'm just looking forward to the whole experience right now.
There you go. Alex, anything you want to add before we close out, buddy?
Trade for Rucker McGroarty.
There you go. He's got it. All right. Well, as always, thank you to the Hockey Podcast Network, who features us on their beautiful network full of hockey shows, DraftKings and Manscaped. If you're looking to head to a game, let's say the Jays, maybe they're turning it up a little bit, check out SeatGeek. Make sure you use code STICKSINTHE6 to get $20 off your first purchase. Otherwise, we'll be back next week after Peter's trip to Vegas with more from the draft and free agency as the Leafs head into the offseason for another year. Until next time, guys, that's us. That's it for us, Sticks in the Six, episode 164.